All right, day 15. So once again, for today, I would suggest warming up with a couple runs on the chess.com Vision Trainer or the Lead Chess Coordinate Trainer. And then once again, the exercise for today should be done without looking at a chessboard. So don't have the board in front of you at all. And the task for today is to name all of the squares controlled by a knight on each of the following squares: c3, f6, d4, and h3. So name all of the squares controlled by a knight on c3, all of the squares controlled by a knight on f6, all of the squares controlled by a knight on d4, and all of the squares controlled by a knight on h3. So then just go ahead and pause your video, write down your answers, and then we'll just take a quick look at the solution. All right, so I got the knights on the squares from the puzzle. So you can use these to just visually look at it and check your answers. Just go through it one by one. And then, you can pause the video while you're doing that, and I'll just have like a real quick closing remark, and then we will actually be 3/4 of the way through the training program. So if you've made it this far, that's great. You're doing yourself a favor. Very few people will have the discipline to do that. We'll ratchet up the difficulty a little bit for the last quarter of the program, but pushing yourself will pay dividends in the long run. All right, the only thing to really mention here is that, let me pull off a couple of these knights from the board. And these two knights here are actually on corresponding squares. So c3 is the equivalent square of f6 for black, and vice versa. If we draw a line down the center, they're mirror images. And they are also on these X-wing fighter corners. And because they're on the left-hand side of the board for white and the left-hand side of the board for black, these are the dark squared corners. And because they're on dark squares, they control light squares. And because they're corresponding knights in the position they cover the same squares in the center. So it's just kind of an interesting geometry, but it also is important, plays out in the openings, especially because the control of these central squares can be so important. So we are 3/4 of the way through, and we'll see you next time as we start day 16.